a man of faith, a woman devoted. Together they built a life, a home, and a ministry. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple, loved, respected, admired. But on a cold autumn night, that perfect image shattered. Sarah Reynolds, the devoted wife of Pastor David Reynolds, was gone. Just gone. Authorities searched, friends prayed, a town waited in fear. And then, the worst. 2 days later, a body was pulled from the river, cold, lifeless, and unrecognizable. It was her, they said. It had to be. The grief was overwhelming. Pastor David, a man known for his unwavering faith, stood before his congregation, trembling, eyes brimming with tears, and delivered a eulogy that left even the most hardened souls in mourning. She was gone, buried, laid to rest, and life, though forever changed, moved forward. A year passed, seasons changed, and Pastor David found love again. Some whispered it was too soon. Others believed he deserved happiness after such unbearable loss. So, on a crisp Sunday morning, inside the very church where he once wept for his late wife, Pastor David stood at the altar, his hands clasped in quiet anticipation. His bride, radiant in white, walked toward him. The guests, the choir, the congregation, everyone watched in reverence. And then it happened. At first it was just a murmur, a gasp, a single voice whispering in disbelief. And then, like a wave crashing against the shore, the entire church fell into chaos. Because standing in that doorway, wearing the same dress she was buried in, was Sarah. She wasn't dead. She never was. But if Sarah Reynolds was alive, then who had they buried? The truth. It was far worse than anyone could have imagined. It began with love, a man devoted to his faith, a woman devoted to him. Together they built a home, a life, a legacy. To those who knew them, they were unshakable, a couple bound by something deeper than vows, deeper than words. Then one evening she was gone, a call unanswered, a bed left cold, no warning, no explanation, just absence. For 2 days the town searched, roads combed, rivers dragged, prayers whispered from lips that struggled to believe the worst. Then the discovery, a body pulled from the dark waters, lifeless, cold, beyond recognition. But it had to be her, it had to be. There was grief, a community in mourning, a husband inconsolable. He stood before the congregation, voice trembling, hands clutching a folded note, speaking of love and loss. He buried her, and with her, an entire world was laid to rest. A year passed, the pain softened, though it never left. Life, as it always does, moved forward, and so did he. Then a new beginning, another chance at happiness, a church filled once more, not with mourners, but with celebration. Friends and family all gathered to witness a moment of joy, a bride walking toward her future, a groom waiting at the altar, hands folded, heart steady. And then it started as a whisper, a single breath caught in a throat, then gasps, a hand clutched over a mouth, a name spoken in disbelief. Eyes widened, faces drained of color, because standing in the doorway, dressed in the same clothes she had been buried in, was Sarah. She wasn't dead. She never was. But if that was true, then who had they buried? The truth. It was worse than anyone could have ever imagined. A year earlier, Pastor David Reynolds stood before his congregation, heartbroken, delivering a eulogy for his beloved wife. He spoke of their love, their faith, and their final moments together. He watched as the casket was lowered into the ground, surrounded by friends, family, and a community in mourning. But behind the grief, behind the tears, behind the condolences and whispered prayers, something else was unfolding. Something no one saw, something no one questioned, until it was too late. Today we are uncovering one of the most shocking cases in recent history. A woman was declared dead, a husband who moved on, and a revelation that turned an entire town upside down. How did Sarah Reynolds die? Who was behind this shocking deception, and what really happened the night she disappeared? The answers would expose a truth darker than anyone could have ever imagined. A man of God, a pillar of the community, a husband who stood before his congregation every Sunday, preaching love, faith, and the certainty of salvation. Pastor David Reynolds was a man people trusted, a man they turned to in times of crisis. But on one fateful night, it was he who found himself drowning in sorrow, consumed by the unthinkable. His wife, Sarah Reynolds, had always been the light of the congregation, a woman of kindness, grace, and quiet devotion. She spent her days tending to the church, organizing community events, and guiding those who had lost their way. To know Sarah was to feel warmth. To be near her was to feel at home. Then, on a cold October evening, that light went out. Sarah never came home that night. She had gone out, like she always did, finishing up work at the church, locking the doors and saying her goodbyes. But somewhere between those steps, something happened, something no one saw, something no one could explain. Pastor David called her phone. No answer. He called again, straight to voicemail. Hours passed, then an entire night, and by morning the worry had turned to fear. A search was launched. Friends, family, church members, everyone who had ever been touched by Sarah's kindness walked the streets, called her name, and knocked on doors. But there was nothing, no sign of struggle, no indication she had left on her own, no trace of Sarah Reynolds at all. Then, 2 days later, the town's worst fears were realized. Authorities received a call. A body had been found downstream, tangled in the reeds, its features unrecognizable, the current having erased the details of the face that once smiled so easily. But the clothing, the jewelry, they were Sarah's. They had no doubt. The official cause of death? Drowning. The town grieved, the congregation mourned, and Pastor David gave a eulogy that left even the strongest souls in the room fighting back tears. His voice trembled, his hands shook, and as the casket was lowered into the ground, he whispered one final goodbye. For the next 12 months, David Reynolds carried on. He healed. He found comfort in his faith. And eventually, he found love again, a new beginning, a second chance. But then, on the day of his wedding, she returned. Sarah Reynolds was standing there, pale, hollow-eyed, wearing the same dress she was buried in. But Sarah was dead, wasn't she? If Sarah Reynolds was alive, then who was buried in her grave? For a while there were whispers, a few hushed conversations behind closed doors, a lingering doubt that refused to fade, because something about Sarah's death didn't feel right. Sarah's cause of death was ruled as an accidental drowning, and yet no autopsy was performed. The Reynolds family cited religious reasons. Pastor David was adamant. Sarah wouldn't have wanted her body disturbed. The town accepted this. They trusted him. Barely 72 hours after she was found, Sarah was laid to rest in a closed casket. Those who saw the body claimed it looked different. Some said it was simply the water damage, the river's toll on her face. Others weren't so sure. 3 months later, David was no longer a grieving widower. He was a man in love. Her name? Linda Parks, a woman who had been in the congregation for years, quiet, observant, waiting. Some found comfort in their union. Others, they called it too soon, too convenient, but no one dared question the pastor. Not yet. 1 year after Sarah's funeral, the town gathered once again inside the same church. This time there were no tears, no sorrow, only joy, only celebration. Pastor David, dressed in crisp white, stood at the altar. Linda, glowing, walked down the aisle. The vows were spoken, the rings were exchanged, and as the words "I do" left Linda's lips, a gust of cold air rushed through the room. Candles flickered. The hushed murmurs of joy turned into stunned silence. At first, people thought it was a mistake, a trick of the light. Then someone gasped, then another, then a scream. Pastor David turned, his face draining of color. Linda's bouquet slipped from her fingers. The congregation sat frozen, watching as a woman they had mourned, a woman they had buried, stepped forward. The dead don't come back, at least they're not supposed to, but Sarah Reynolds had returned, and the entire town was about to learn the dark truth Pastor David had kept hidden. What really happened to Sarah? And if she was alive, who was buried in her place? The truth was far darker than anyone could have imagined. The woman who had walked into the church wasn't just a survivor of a tragic accident. No, Sarah Reynolds had been the victim of something far worse. Sarah had been drugged and kidnapped the night of her disappearance. Pastor David's plan had been meticulous. He had orchestrated everything, every detail. The storm, the disappearance, the body found in the river. The body found in the river was not Sarah. It was a Jane Doe, someone who had been left for dead, a victim of Pastor David's deceit. The body was misidentified because of the clothes Sarah had worn, and the town believed what they were told. The funeral was real, but the death? A lie. As for Pastor David, he had faked Sarah's death so he could marry Linda Parks, his mistress, and inherit her wealth. Together they'd plotted to rid themselves of Sarah, to start anew, to leave the past behind. But Sarah, as it turned out, wasn't as helpless as they had hoped. She had escaped her captors just in time to stop the wedding, just in time to reveal the truth. The woman who had been presumed dead, the woman whose funeral had been held just a year before, was standing in the church doorway, ready to expose everything. The shock waves from that moment rippled through the town, and what followed was nothing short of a courtroom spectacle. Pastor David was arrested for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. The charges piled up as the details of his scheme were laid bare, each revelation more chilling than the last. Linda Parks, the woman David had planned to marry, was revealed to be complicit in the plot. She had helped him orchestrate the kidnapping, and together they had tried to rid themselves of Sarah, sacrificing her life for their own gain. Sarah, though traumatized by the horrors she endured, became a key witness in the trial. Her testimony brought the truth to light. The town was left to grapple with the betrayal of a man they had trusted. The pastor who had guided their spiritual lives had been living a double life. But as the case wrapped up, one question lingered. Was this Pastor David's first crime? Or had he hidden other dark secrets, buried deep beneath the surface? Had Sarah been just the latest victim in a long line of deceit? Some stories leave more questions than answers, and some never end. Was this truly a crime of passion, or something even darker? The question of Pastor David's true motives may never be fully answered. Did he plan this from the start, or was there something more at play? Do you believe his deception was a carefully constructed lie from the very beginning? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you found this case shocking, hit like and subscribe for more jaw-dropping true crime stories.